I'm John Bond. Welcome to Move Yourself Happy. Made for fitness enthusiasts who want to make their passion their profession. Are you unhappy in your present job? Are you passionate about health and fitness? Do you want to release your true potential? If the answer is yes, this podcast is for you. I will be teaching you the specific knowledge that every trainer and coach needs to be successful. So listen closely as I share my expertise with you. So just like me, you can love what you do. Welcome back. Now, in the last episode, I talked about stabilisation. Stabilisation, extremely important for injury prevention, but also maximising performance. And what was that expression I kept saying? You can't fire a cannon out of a canoe, which means we need to have good stability if we want to be able to produce some good force, some good power and strength. So stability, stabilisation is all about that. But we're going to move on now. So I mentioned in the last episode that I worked towards this progression pyramid. So we created a progression pyramid at Storm Fitness Academy. We start stabilisation and we move on to the next phase, muscular endurance. Now, muscular endurance is about overcoming resistance repeatedly. So muscular strength, which I'll talk about in another episode, is more about the maximum amount of force you can produce, whereas muscular endurance is, yes, overcoming a resistance and overcoming a force, but doing that repeatedly without fatigue. And this links nicely to stability because when we've created some good stabilisation, so our shoulders have got good stabilisation in there, meaning we can prevent unwanted movement in the shoulder girdle. Our hips have got good stability, so we can prevent unwanted movement in the hips, the ankles and the spine. Then we're much more robust and we're much more resilient to now take things to that next level where we're going to up the reps a bit more. So we've learned some really good, strong movement patterns. Now we can challenge those movement patterns a bit more with higher reps and higher resistance and just more general fatigue. But just going straight into doing high rep stuff, moving load around, moving your body weight around different places is fine. People do it, but the injury risk is higher and we don't perform as well if we haven't done that first phase of stabilisation. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, check out the last episode. All right, let's begin. So muscular endurance, all about overcoming resistance repeatedly and prolonging fatigue. So I might be really, really strong, but I might fatigue quickly. So muscular endurance is about building your ability to resist that fatigue when it sets in. And typically in strength and conditioning, anything that is sort of exceeds 12 reps really, we classify that as muscular endurance. So again, there's a separate pyramid that is often used in S&C, which talks about, muscular endurance, hypertrophy, strength, power, and there's reps and sets that are linked to each of those. Now, muscular endurance, like I said, for most publications, when you read them, they'll suggest but beyond 12 reps is classed as muscular endurance. Typically 1 to 3 sets, and the rest periods don't want to be too long because we're trying to promote muscular endurance. So if we're resting too long, then we're not challenging that system. Okay, so what are the benefits? Let's talk about that first. Well, it might be that for whether you're an athlete or a non-athlete, that one of the limiting factors in your quality of life or your performance on the court, field, pitch, whatever, is muscular fatigue. You find your arm, if you're a boxer, your cardio is great, but your arms are getting tired when you're throwing those punches all the time. You're feeling the burn in the shoulders, etc. It might be if you're a runner that it's the quads that always fatigue so much. If you're a bodybuilder, again, that could be one of those limiting factors. Or just as a person who wants to kind of enjoy life, playing with your children, running around, climbing trees, all that sort of stuff. And it's always like, oh God, my arms are tired or my legs are tired. Muscular endurance. So that is something that you can develop. Now, building on the stability phase, we want to keep some of that stabilization stuff in there, because you've learned some good stability during that stability phase. So in our muscular endurance phase, we still want to keep some of that stuff in there. But now what we're doing is we're adding some extra exercise where the goal or the objective in that session is to push the muscular endurance. Now you can do that with good old-fashioned barbell exercises, bench presses, squats, deadlifts, etc. But just be careful that the load's not too high, because if you're doing high repetitions of heavy deadlifts, it's a big strain. The technique's got to be so good, a little wobble in your technique and you can hurt yourself. So things like, again, we talked about kettlebells in the stability phase. Kettlebells are great for this, because you can do things like kettlebell swings, overhead presses, and we can do those for a high number of reps relatively safely without such a big risk as something like throwing a barbell around, for example. So just to reiterate, what we want is to be exceeding the 12 rep range, or at least 12. So it might be that you do 12 reps of kettlebell swings. You could go higher. There's different published articles that suggest different things, but they're all around the same sort of thing. So anything beyond 25 reps, we sort of suggest that that's now becoming cardio, and you're losing the benefits of improving muscle endurance, and now it's becoming more about your heart and lungs. So just bear that in mind when you're programming for clients. If you're trying to improve their muscle endurance, probably a minimum of 12 reps and then maximum of 25. Yeah, sometimes you want to go more. If you're doing things like, I know CrossFit, they call them cash outs, where you might have to just do 50 burpees for time, or 30 barbell cleans or something for time, and that stuff can be quite fun in a weird sort of way, and I don't have any sort of big issues with that. And of course you're going to build some muscle endurance from that, but just sort of try to keep things generally, when you're programming, within the 12 to 25 rep range to build muscle endurance, because we need enough resistance that the body is learning how to overcome that resistance repeatedly, and then recover between reps and between sets from the fatiguing waste products that are built up from those reps. So for those of you who've ever done like really heavy lifting, when you do like reps in the 1 to 5 rep range, it's too short a time period and the tension's too low for you to actually produce those fatiguing waste products, so you won't get like a muscular burn or anything. Whereas when you do muscular endurance work, you'll start to use your lactic acid system, which produces lactate as a byproduct. That's a fatiguing waste product, so your body has to learn to clear that. So I would say muscular endurance is a combination of your strength, because obviously if you're very, very strong, then there's going to be a natural increase of endurance, from the point of view that if you get someone that can bench press 100 kilos, if you take 50 kilos away and give them 50 kilos, they're probably going to be able to do quite a lot of reps of 50 kilos because they can bench press 100. If you take somebody who's got really good muscular endurance but they can only bench press 50 kilos, they can only bench press 50 kilos. So some of it is the development of strength, but then a lot of it is your subjective tolerance to lactate accumulation. And when I say subjective tolerance, what I mean is your mental toughness really is tolerate being uncomfortable. Some people are very good at that, aren't they? You get a lot of people that you've probably trained with people that they can just put themselves through it and just keep going. And that's kind of what they train people to do in the military. They call it character building. They're not building athletes, they're building soldiers. And those people that can just put themselves through it and keep going, very, very mentally very tough. And you will develop some of that. Working in the muscular endurance range, experience that sort of discomfort of muscles burning and trying to keep going, you are going to develop your subjective tolerance to muscle fatigue and lactate buildup. But actually some of it is physiological as well. So your body gets better at clearing the lactate. So over time, what would normally start to accumulate too much lactate within the muscles where you'd have to eventually stop, over time with training, your body clears it. So you can keep going. And a lot of those developments in, like some of you might be strong enough to do a lot of press ups, but the fatigue is what's, that muscular fatigue is preventing you at the moment. Well, when your body gets used to clearing that lactate, you'll be able to keep going, do more press ups without necessarily getting stronger, just better endurance. They are linked, so they are sort of, how can I explain it? They're not completely exclusive from one another. There is a link between strength and endurance. Hopefully I've made that clear anyway, so I won't labour the point on that too much. Okay, so there we go. So if we want to build somebody's muscular endurance, we need to program reps 12 and above, probably not exceeding 25 unless you're doing it on occasion for fun. There'll be some benefits still, but just not all the time. We want minimal rests, probably 30 seconds between sets. Also, you want to be using generally compound movements. So if you were to do bicep curls, for example, you'll build up muscle endurance within the biceps, but actually you're missing out on an opportunity to just build general muscle endurance of a movement pattern. So I would tend to stick to like pushes and pulls, squats and hip hinges when you're programming the muscle endurance stuff. Now, the other thing you need to think about is the safety aspect of it, because when someone's doing higher reps, particularly when we're trying to encourage fatigue, because we're actually trying to build up these waste products, we need to ensure that you're managing risk. Now, we can't eliminate risk, particularly when we're trying to get to those new levels of fitness. We can't eliminate risk, but we can manage it and try and control it as best we can. So doing things like heavy work for high reps is going to be high risk. So we tend to want to reduce the load somewhat. Maybe looking at really complex exercises, and this is where I have a fondness towards CrossFit, and I'm very careful not to sort of talk badly of it, because I think they've done wonders for the fitness community. They've introduced great communities, they've got people off the sofa, they've probably saved a lot of people's lives because they've injected this new passion and hobby into people's lives. But I suppose the only part of CrossFit that I question, and I don't know if I would go so far as to say I have issues with, but I just think when I weigh up for myself personally the risk to reward ratio, I think for most people it's too risky, is the high repetitions of Olympic lifts. So going high reps on snatches, barbell cleans, the sort of stuff they do, muscle ups, all that type of stuff. Now for me, they are skills. They are great skills and they are great for developing strength and power. Of course, there's some benefit to doing them explosively and for high reps, but there's also a risk there. And I would argue for the average person, it's an unnecessary risk. But as an adult, as an educated adult, it's up to you, isn't it? It's your risk. If you know that that's the case when you go into that sort of thing and you love it anyway and you're quite happy to take the risk, then crack on. But that's just my thoughts on it. I've done CrossFit and I thoroughly enjoyed it, but I did get injured quite quickly. So I'm not, again, like I said, I just really, for me, it's quite important to stress that I'm not slagging CrossFit off, because I think it's a wonderful organisation. They've done some great things, and I think the athletes are inspirational for what they can do. So I'm really careful not to slag it off. But my personal experience was, I loved it, got injured quite quickly. That did put me off, unfortunately. And so, I have to take on board some of this myself, because I'm an individual that if I'm around other people, I will naturally get a little bit competitive. I think I've mellowed somewhat as I've got older, but I found it quite difficult to go into a training session and go, today, John, you need to just hold back a bit and just go moderate intensity. But if there were other guys in the group who were similar fitness or a little bit fitter, I'd have to go for it. That's just my mindset. And what I needed actually was a coach to go, John, not today. Hold back today. You don't need to be doing that today. You came yesterday or you were 2 days ago, you smashed it that day, hold back today. That's what I needed. But that's too much to ask out of a coach to know exactly what I'm feeling right now and to know that today's the day I need to hold back. Anyway, I digress big time there. But so back to muscular endurance. So we know about reps, we know about sets, we know rest periods need to be short. We need to choose exercises that we conduct for high repetition safely with a lower risk of fatigue. And the benefits of it that are, we'll be able to play sport, things like tennis. Wimbledon's on at the moment. And with tennis, you're constantly hitting that ball over the net, you're running backwards and forwards, muscular fatigue is going to be a thing, and with development of muscular endurance, that might mean being able to do that, play that extra set if it goes to 5 sets. So that's the sort of thing that you're going to benefit from. Okay, I think that's all I've got to say about muscular endurance. Have I missed anything? Don't know why I'm asking you. Nah, let's leave it there. Okay, so next episode, I am going to talk about the next part on our progression pyramid, which is hypertrophy. And hypertrophy is kind of like a posh word for building muscle. And some of you might be switching off straight away as soon as I say that. I don't want to build muscle. But I promise you, there's a ton of benefits to building muscle that you're going to want to hear about. And I'm just going to leave you with this thought. It is possible to build muscle, and when somebody looks at you, they do not see any increase in muscle size, but they see definition and tone. And I don't know anyone who doesn't love a bit of definition and a bit of tone. So that's what you need to think about. In fact, we need to change the name of hypertrophy phase to like the body composition phase, or the toning phase, or whatever you want to call it, because it's fantastic for that. Okay, right, I've got a long walk to get back home, so I am going to leave you there. Hope you enjoyed that. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I will see you next time. Now, if you enjoyed today's episode, something you can do for me is subscribe to my show. And if you know anyone else that might be interested in this content, then please share it with them too. You can also head over to our socials and follow us on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook and YouTube. But if you're ready to take that next step, visit our website, www.stormfitnessacademy.co.uk, fill out a contact form, that will come straight to me. I will contact you shortly afterwards, and I look forward to speaking to you then.